Are you maximizing one of the coolest features on any Canon cinema camera? Let's go ahead and look at slow and fast motion and how to get the most out of it. Well, before we get too fast in the slow motion stuff, please do me a favor. If this does help you, please subscribe. It is unbelievably helpful in helping me keeping this channel go, and it just lets me know that this is actually making a difference out there. So subscribing is awesome. All right, let's go ahead and get back into it. The Canon Cinema System has a lot of incredible little features to it, and one of my favorite is the slow and fast mode, or as it's called, S&F mode, on the buttons and stuff on the camera. And this is an incredibly flexible way of choosing frame rates on the camera. And now, all these cinema cameras will let you shoot a standard 24, 30, 60, 25, or 50 if you're in PAL, but those are very, very confined things. There are a lot of us out there that want the creativity and the flexibility of shooting in more flexible frame rates. And what's great about that is slow and fast mode on the Canon Cinema System lets you choose your own frame rate anywhere from 1 frame per second all the way up to 120 frames per second. Now, one of the key differences between S&F mode and doing a standard, say, setting your camera to 60 frames per second is if you shoot a camera at 60 frames per second, you have to bring that footage into your After Effects or Premiere or DaVinci Resolve, and you need to convert that to see it play back in slow motion. Slow and fast does that all in the camera. If I want to record at 48 frames per second, I record it at 48 frames per second, and in the field, I can instantly see the playback at 48 frames per second. Same goes with any frame rate I want. Having that ability to instantly see the feedback of how this thing will ultimately play back in the field is an absolute gigantic thing for me and makes a lot of sense when I'm on set, making sure I'm coming home capturing exactly what I wanted and not being surprised later in the computer. Now, traditionally, one of the drawbacks of this system was when you had this conversion in camera, you couldn't record sound, which for if you're doing B-roll and stuff isn't important, but sometimes sound is very, very important. What's great now is that they have an S&F audio clip version that you can now record a separate audio clip so you can record in that slow motion and still have the audio as a separate clip that you can play back later. Super, super awesome. Makes this tool even more powerful than it already was. Now, all that being said, there are some tips and tricks you need to know to set up your camera to really maximize the setting, because there are some things that will catch you by surprise as you go down the road, and I'm gonna go ahead and talk about them to make sure you have the greatest chance of success as you do it. Now, the first thing that I recommend if you're recording in slow and fast motion, and honestly, if you have a cinema camera, this should be pretty much default, but if you're like someone on an R5C that's not used to this, you need to set your shutter mode to angle. And the reason why you want to set your shutter mode to angle is if you're jumping between 24 frames a second and 48 frames or 60 frames a second, you want to maintain a consistent shutter angle so your motion stays consistent. I know I've been bitten in the past before when days get going fast and I start jumping into different frame rates that I'll get in post, and my motion will have tons of motion blur because I forgot to have a consistent shutter angle. If you set shutter angle, your camera will always default to make sure you're having the same motion blur no matter what. So setting it to shutter angle is very important. So the first thing you want to do is you want to come here in this second menu, go to shutter mode, and make sure it's not on speed, set it to shutter angle. It'll save you a lot of headache down the road. You're gonna thank me that you did it. All right, now once we got our shutter angle done, we're gonna come over here to our second menu, and we're gonna go to our settings. Now, the first thing you do wanna look at right here is you can see that I have my frame rate set to 23.98 frames per second. I like to record in 24 frames a second. You can set to 29, you can set to, or 30, you can set to 60. It's whatever you'd like to work in. Now, remember, when you do this and then go into slow and fast frame rate, this is going to convert it to that base frame rate. So if you shoot 48 frames per second, it's going to shoot it at 48 and then do the final recording and convert it in camera to that 24 frames per second. So once I have that set, I'll come over here now to recording mode. And as you can see, I have normal recording. And this is where I get this whole list of great things that are part of it. Now you see slow and fast motion and S&F clip/audio/wave. Now this is really, really important. If you're going to be shooting, just say B-roll, and you know you're going to be throwing away that audio, you're never going to use it again, you don't want it, it's just superfluous stuff that you're going to throw away anyway, just go ahead and record in slow and fast motion. If you do want the audio files for any reason, make sure you put S&F clip/audio wave. And this will give you essentially a audio file of the stuff that you're recording that's there recorded on another card. And this is very, very important. If you want to access this, you need to make sure you have 2 cards in the camera. On your CF Express card, you will record the main slow motion, and then on your SD card, it will be recording the WAV files that you can match up in post later. If you don't have those 2 cards, you're not going to record the audio. If you want the audio, you need to remember that because it's very, very important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm just going to slip, for the sake of purposes here, to slow and fast motion. And once you get into slow and fast motion, you will now see you can set your slow and fast frame rate. And if you look here, what's great is I guys basically have a dial that I can go all the way down here to 1 frame per second, all the way up. I can skirt all the way up and shoot it all the way up to 120 frames per second. So I have a ton of flexibility in how I want to shoot. I really love 96 frames per second. Honestly, even more than 120. I like to shoot in that a lot. But for the sake of purposes here, I'm going to set it at 48 frames per second, and you will see we're good to go. And when I come out here, what you can see at the top here is that you can look at the top and you can see that 48/23.98p. And that's letting me know I'm shooting at 48 frames per second, and it's going to convert it to a 24 frames per second file. So I know that's going in. I know if I hit that, I've got it. And you got the telltale S&F sign there that lets me go and work really well. So I know where I'm in, so I don't get confused and I don't sit there and record a bunch of stuff in the wrong frame rate. Now, S&F is an incredible feature here on the Canon R5C and the Canon Cinema line, but it does have one significant weakness that you need to be aware of, and that is the fact that you lose traditional tracking on your camera. Now, you still have AF when you're using S&F, but you do lose that tracking mode that is so helpful. And that means that there are some things you need to do to maximize your autofocus when you're using an S&F mode to give yourself the greatest chance of success while you're shooting. All right, now the first thing you want to do is you want to come here and set your continue AF point to enable. And then I also like to go, when you look at the autofocus frame, I will usually put it on large. Now this is a little confusing because remember, I did a video, if you're very interested in actually getting the best AF performance from the Canon R5C, I did a video, I'll put up a link here. To get the tracking motion to maximize, you actually need to set this to whole area. But if you're coming in slow and fast mode, whole area is not going to work for you as good. You need to put it to large so you have some level of selectability in what you focus on. That's a very, very important point to remember. And then also for my AF frame position, you can center frame it. I want to put it selectable because I want to be able to touch it and have it go where I want. So hit it to selectable. And once I do that, now I can touch on the back of my screen and set the AF point, and the AF point will go. So you get that kind of touch and grab AF point in SF mode, which I find very, very helpful. Now, the other thing you need to make sure is you need to make sure when you come to your AF response is that you set it for a faster AF response. I usually set mine to +3 or +2 because in slow motion, you're going to want the autofocus to be jumpy and quick because remember, it's taking so much longer to get where you're going. This is very, very different than when I'm shooting at standard 24 frames per second where I want to maybe make the AF move a little more slower so it's more natural. In slow motion, because everything's exaggerated in time, I want to have a snappy, fast AF. And that's why I usually set mine to +2 or +3. And then just to make sure you're well aware, if I come over one menu, you can see all of my tracking menus here are essentially grayed out in this mode. So that is one serious drawback to this feature, but I do find myself very, very often able to use the touch and grab function of the back of this camera on the screen. It lets me grab a snap autofocus, and I can also then use a frame rate that I really love. And remember, for some reason you still need to get advanced tracking on a shot and it needs to be in slow motion, you can always go ahead and take off S&F mode and switch your camera back to normal recording mode and record in 60 frames per second, and then you'll have access to all the normal recording AF modes that you need, and you can get advanced tracking. It's just one of those things that you need to be aware of when you're doing it, because having access to all these cool different frame rates is awesome, but it does come with that trade-off and losing that tracking. I'm really hoping someday Canon will come out with a firmware update that will allow us to do tracking while we're doing S&F mode, but as it stands right now, that's not something that we technically have access to, but I think it can be fixed. It's just one of those things that Canon, please give us a firmware upgrade. That would be awesome. Anyway, guys, I hope that was helpful. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. Please leave me any notes or messages down below. Yeah, go out there, keep on shooting, and yeah, I'll talk to you soon.